Welcome to SEC Football Live, post-Week 6, previewing week number 7. My name is Braden Gall, and that is Michael Braden of that SEC podcast. And you guys are already in the comment section, so we do appreciate you guys coming along for the ride. Get to me at Braden Gall on Twitter. And, of course, if you want some game previews, please go check out the 440 Sports YouTube page. That's 440 Sports on YouTube, Twitter, and across all podcast apps. Mike, what is up, my man? How are you?
I'm tired. It's been a struggle to wake up, and I don't know if you've seen it, Braden. You know, I don't want to make it about myself, but I've been mocked relentlessly. Hell, Paul Feinbaum does a 4-hour show. They must have mocked me about 50 times on Monday, which I deserve. Of course, I deserve all of this, but yeah, so I guess it's going pretty good.
Well, being mocked in this business, I learned a long time ago that if you take time out of your day to jump into our comment section to tell me how low my IQ is, or open up your phone and open up the Twitter app or the X app to tell me how dumb my takes are, or to log on to YouTube and comment on one of my videos or our shows about how stupid my take was about Texas A&M beating, yeah, there you go. If you take time to do that, I am honored. And when I fill in for Paul, what do you think they do to me? They call in and they say, "You're not taking enough calls. You suck. You talk too much. You talk too much about football." And I'm like, it's a talk show, number one. But like, I'm not Paul Feinbaum, you know, like who nobody is. So like, if you're insulting me by saying, "Oh, you're not Paul Feinbaum," and I'm like, okay, thanks for taking the time out of your day. We do have a lot to discuss today on the show. Georgia and Alabama, which is, I believe, what we're referring to here, have taken control, at least for now, of their respective divisions and appear to be potentially on a collision course for Atlanta. I have a playoff theory I want to float your way and see what people think. We saw the future of the SEC on display in the state of Texas last weekend. Also, some elimination games kind of in the SEC East. A lot of surviving people. A lot of teams in the SEC East need to survive. We've got 3 teams in the West that are combined 0-8, and I have a quarterback theory for you guys as well. So lots of stuff to do today on the show. If you want to jump into the comments and ask questions, we'd love to talk with you guys. I just wanted to Greg Sankey was at the Texas State Fair, of course. Texas and Oklahoma put on a ridiculously good show. That is kind of how that game goes all the time. 2022 kind of being the rare exception of a blowout between those two. I'm curious how much more SEC fans were paying attention. Like, how much more were people watching? Because last year, the news had already happened. Last year, we knew this was going to take place, but it was a big dud of a game. I'm assuming Dylan Gabriel and Quinn Ewers got a lot of attention from SEC fans this week.
I would strongly disagree, Braden, because all the ones I'm hearing are they hate it. Texas, they hate Oklahoma. Don't mention them. Don't talk about them. But, hey, that's their loss because they're coming, whether you want them or not. And they're playing good football. That was the game of the year, I thought. Went down to the wire. Credit Oklahoma. I don't think anybody picked Oklahoma to win that game unless you were a diehard Sooner. And that's not to say Texas blew it. I thought Oklahoma took it from them. So it was a hell of a game. They're pumping their chest, but unfortunately, and this is kind of the format we're in now with the playoff and the playoff expanding and all this. At the end of the day, I don't even know what that win's worth, Braden, because it's all about the next one if they meet. And if Texas wins the next one, that one's irrelevant.
Well, I've been fighting this irrelevant talking point for a really long time, and I think, no disrespect to you, I think it's one of the dumbest things we do as a college football media and as fans. We say, "Oh, XYZ game is going to quote unquote mean less," and like, for who? For the players? No fucking way. There's no chance that game. Those two didn't play as hard as humanly possible. For the coaches, no. Coaches get fired and hired over rivalry games like this. Is it mattering for seeding in a potential 12-team playoff? You betcha. Does it matter in an SEC standings competition in the future when they're in the conference? You betcha. Like, nothing changed. This argument that the game.
So if Texas wins the rematch,
let me finish.
It means nothing.
Let me finish. If the argument that you're taking a tiny bit of shine off the biggest game of the year to add some shine to like 42 other games, then I'm fine with that. But every regular season game, all 60 minutes of every game, with the exception of like the 2 paycheck games for every team, is still incredibly important with a 12-team playoff. I think it's complete horseshit, and I think it's wrong to say. If they play again, it doesn't. In a 12-team playoff, it still matters. The champion gets in. The champion doesn't get in. The seeding matters. The standings in the SEC matter. The rivalry game matters to the players. They're not going to play any less hard. You're not going to root any less hard if you're a fan. And this goes for Auburn, Alabama. This goes for every rivalry in college football. I just don't buy it. I think it's nonsense.
So if Brock Bowers, let's say he has an injury, he can play, but they don't need him. They're undefeated, and this is a 12-team format, and they sit him for the SEC champ. I mean, that's going to happen. There's going to be games.
Why would that happen?
Because they don't need the win to make the playoff. Because they could, if they're 12-1 and they lose in the SEC champ, they're making the 12-team format.
So Mike Braden is going to watch less, enjoy it less. First of all, it's never happened. It's happened in bowl games that don't matter. It's never happened in a real football game where a guy sat out because of an injury. Happens in the NFL occasionally. Peyton Manning used to do it, basically in week 17 when the Colts had clinched everything. He would maybe take one snap to keep his start streak alive, and then he would sit for the one game. College football is different because seeding matters. If you're playing in an SEC championship game, Alabama and Georgia, do you want to be the 1 seed and get a bye and win a championship, an SEC championship, or do you want to be the 5 or 6 or 7 seed and have to play a road game in the first round? Like it's still incredibly important. I don't
how about this?
understand.
What if Alabama's already locked up the West, yet they got to play the Iron Bowl, and they may sit many of their starters because who the hell cares? Because you'll have an opportunity to go play in the SEC championship game in a week, and that's the elimination.
Bama's had the West locked up heading into the Iron Bowl how many times? Dozens of times
in a 12-team playoff. No, but that's never happened.
Well, no, I get your point there, but like, to suggest that Alabama is going to sit out the Iron Bowl is one of the silliest things I've ever heard.
And what happens if they don't, and then Jalen Milroe breaks his arm, and then they lose, by 50 points in the SEC? You want a championship or you want the Iron Bowl? I mean, that's going to be the conversation, and that's where we're headed. And it's not just the Iron Bowl. There's many games like that.
They want both. This is college football. There's only 12 of them. You want them all. You want everything, and it's why it's the only time I can think of a player in college football doing this with games that matter was Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa got hurt in like week 2, like 4 years ago, whenever it was. In a TCU game between Ohio State and TCU. He got hurt and he sat out the rest of the season because he was injured he was going to be out for like 9 or 10 weeks, and it was going to be rushing to get it back, and he decided to sit out. Okay, one time that I can think of in 20 years of covering the sport, a player has chosen his financial future, millions of dollars, his financial future, over his own risk for his body. That is not tied at all in any way to Ohio State's rivalry games or Ohio State's championship hopes. It is tied specifically to one individual's financial future. And if, to your point, one player decides that, that's up to the player. But again, it's only happened one time in history.
Well, I'm not even calling out the players. I'm
coaches aren't going to do it.
Coaches have done it.
Happen.
I can give you a perfect example that you are blatantly overlooking.
All right.
And it was a man named Kyle Pitts who they sat for LSU because they thought, well, LSU's a joke. We got this one in hand. We're on our way. We've already locked up the East. We're going to play Alabama. This is going to be our opportunity to punch our ticket to the college football playoff.
Year.
They sat Kyle Pitts against Florida, and they lost, or against LSU, excuse me, and they lost that game. And hell, they still nearly knocked off Alabama. But I think that was a sign to the team that this was not a game you had to take seriously, and somehow they found a way to lose at home. It was the COVID year, but they lost at home to a really bad LSU team.
Yeah, I think that was a questionable LSU team, that's for sure, and a great football game, by the way. There's no question about that. They had already lost to A&M that year, I believe, early in the season. So I don't know if a playoff spot was on the line. I think
they were number 5 in the country.
I'd have to double check that, but they had already lost at least one game. So I'm not saying that in teams that there aren't rare occasions where a football player goes, man, that championship game is more important, so I need to be fully healthy. And if you're not fully healthy, to me, that's a totally different discussion. Like taking a guy who's 70% and you want him to be 100% for next week, I'm okay with that. That's just strategy. I don't have a problem with that. I'm talking about a guy who's 100% and is just we're just gonna say, you know what, we're gonna lose this game. And there's too much at stake. Like, look at the 12-team playoff, and this is what I wanted to ask you about with this weekend, because you have a 3-point spread between A&M and Tennessee. You have a 2-point spread with Florida and South Carolina. LSU's an 11-point favorite over Auburn. Kentucky and Missouri would be a playoff game today. Like, this week is a playoff game for Missouri and Kentucky. That doesn't happen in a 14 playoff. In a 14 playoff, those two fan bases are fighting for like a memorable season. Some really good Saturday evenings, some really fun players, and maybe a 10-win season that we can celebrate 20 years from now. But in a 12-team playoff, Missouri, Kentucky, and Texas A&M, Tennessee, those are playoff games. Those are playoff games, and they mean so much more. So Texas and Oklahoma might play again. That's fine. It happens in every sport under the sun. Teams rematch. I don't understand why people think the rematch is not, like, what's wrong with a rematch? I don't understand. I want to see it again. Give me Texas, Oklahoma every week.
Well, so you don't think it's a playoff game for Missouri this weekend already in a 14 format?
Well, no.
They control their destiny.
Okay, let's be reasonable. If they can beat Georgia on the road,
they nearly knocked them off last year. Georgia was better.
Okay, that's not what I'm not arguing.
Mizzou's better.
I'm not arguing that, but in a reasonable situation, there's no way you're picking Missouri to go 11-1. Now, if they go 10-2, it is a historically great season for Missouri, and we celebrate that season. We're gonna remember Brady Cook and Luther Burden and that offense if you're a Missouri fan for the rest of your life. Just like Matt Corral, just like last year's Tennessee team, just like those 10-2 Kentucky teams. All those teams should be celebrated historically. But you know what makes them a little bit cooler is if they have playoff games. Missouri still has everything to play for. I'm not arguing with you there. You're correct. But no reasonable human is picking Missouri to win the East right now. I'd love to see it happen. It'd be awesome for content. but I'm not picking it to happen. They've got a lot of really tough games. And I think 9-3, 10-2 is a really nice bar to shoot for. And would be, again, 10-2 would be a hell of a season. But in the playoff era, that's a playoff team. Right now, it's not a playoff team if they go 10-2, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
Well, no, is Missouri 10-2 if they lose to Georgia going to make the playoff this year? Answer's no. So
yeah, I don't think so.
In a 12-team playoff, if their only losses are to LSU on a last possession game in a great shootout, an LSU team that could be 9 or 10 wins, and a loss on the road to Georgia, that could absolutely get you into the playoff. Absolutely.
The voters seem to hate Missouri for some reason. Are they even ranked right now? I don't think they are.
They are in one poll. They aren't in another. But again, polls are irrelevant. They don't matter. I just like Tennessee, Texas A&M is going to be and Missouri, Kentucky. These are two fantastic football games. We largely don't know what to expect from either of them. We kind of have some ideas of strengths and weaknesses and how the matchups are going to go. I'm going to be at the Tennessee game this weekend with my kids. That game is a playoff game with the 12-team format. It's an elimination game. And that is not the case right now in the SEC race. Could A&M and Tennessee find their way into it? I'm not arguing that. Factually, statistically, they can. But no one thinks that Texas A&M and Tennessee are going to play in Atlanta. It's possible, but no one's predicting that. But the winner of that game would be set up for a really good chance at a playoff spot. And that is the value of the 12-team playoff versus the 14 playoff, is all these other teams are more important for longer. And that's what makes this weekend great in a 12-team format. I mean, it's great either way, but it's even better in a 12-team format.
Man, why are you eyeing 2024 so bad?
I'm not.
We're in the thick of 2023, my friend.
I just asked you about Texas, Oklahoma, and you said, what does it matter? You poo-pooed the whole thing, and I said, well, that's ridiculous. Players are going to play in that game as hard as possible, no matter what. Coaches get fired for losing.
I feel like my answer is 2023 based. I mean, if Texas wins the championship, they're going to be in. It's not going to be Oklahoma that's in.
You mean into the playoff?
Yes.
Well, sure. Okay. What's your point?
That they, the most important one is yet to be determined. They're yet to be played. We're just assuming that they advance to the Big 12 championship, but which is certainly, given Texas's history, I don't think you could assume that they're going to steamroll anybody in that conference. But I don't know. I mean, the point is a nice win, but it's not the one that matters.
I think the one that matters is eye of the beholder, for the individuals that are competing. The Iron Bowl, again, we make this joke about SEC rivalries all the time and rivalries across college football. The Egg Bowl, if Ole Miss and Mississippi State are 0-11, that game doesn't lose any juice. That game is still the most important game of the season for both teams. It still defines the community in Mississippi for 364 days. Like it doesn't lose any juice if they're 0-11. If they happen to be 9-2, both of them, which obviously isn't going to happen this year. Maybe one of them, maybe Ole Miss is there. But if they get to 9-2, oh my God, the Egg Bowl not only is the Egg Bowl, but it probably puts a team into the playoff, which would never happen in any other type of format if they were 9-2. So I guess my point is I think this concern about the rivalries losing some value, I think is kind of horseshit, honestly. I just think it is. The Iron Bowl.
How about we do the Mike Leach 64 team playoff? Well, then every game is
with all due respect to my former coworker. Anyway, Oklahoma. Like, here's the thing. To your point about Texas and Oklahoma, if Texas wins out, it has to earn itself another chance at Oklahoma, and Oklahoma has to win out and earn itself a chance at the playoff. And could one of those two teams earn their way into the playoff? Sure, but I don't. Right now, I think other things have to happen around the like.
I don't even think Oklahoma's got to win out, do they? I mean, they could probably afford a loss even after that win. So to your point, that all important win, they can afford to lose drop a game and still make the conference championship. I would suspect.
Well, so why is it that you think because one team can afford a loss that it somehow makes the season less enjoyable? Like, I don't understand the connection. I've never understood this. Missouri and Kentucky Kentucky just got their ass stomped, and Missouri lost a tough game. They're both 5-1. Would it be more fun for those fan bases if they were 6-0? Sure. But it doesn't make the game any less enjoyable for anybody watching the fact that they lost last week. It's still a critically important game. It's a 2-point spread. It's a great rivalry in the East. Games have been very strange between those two teams. It's a really important game for Drinkwitz. It's a really important game for the trajectory of Missouri and Kentucky. And next year, there'll be even more gravity to it because it's a playoff game. I don't understand, like, the 12-0 thing being the goal and the most important thing in college football was gone 15 years ago. Like, the 0 being the most important thing in college football, that's been gone for a long time, dude. It's not what matters. Like, does that make sense? Like, how many Nick Saban teams have been undefeated? 2? 20-09?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that sounds about right.
And because they lost one and could lose one, were those seasons less enjoyable for people?
I don't count any of those championships. They didn't go undefeated.
True. That's true. They don't count.
Because it's Bama.
I forgot.
Tennessee went undefeated 98. That's the last great. And Georgia's been pretty good here lately. But beyond that, there's no good one. I don't count the COVID year.
That's fair. To me, it's just about shifting our focus from the 12-0 0, like the 0 being undefeated, and being like this mythical thing. And sure, if a team goes like Georgia 2 years ago or last year, if they go undefeated, it's a mythical, like, it's a thing that is very, very special. And I'm okay with it being extremely difficult and special. I'm also okay with 10-2 teams who are really, really historically good, especially for programs like Missouri and Kentucky and Ole Miss and Arkansas and South Carolina that don't normally have a chance. How many teams have won divisions since 1992? Like a handful of times. Mississippi State once, Arkansas once, South Carolina once, Kentucky 0.
Right. Ole Miss, so you got me thinking though, like, so South Carolina, when they knocked off Tennessee last year, if that took Tennessee from a 3 seed to the 8 seed, do you think South Carolina's talking shit for 9 months? I don't think they are. I think they're talking shit because they whooped Tennessee's ass and knocked them out of playoff spot.
I think that's an interesting idea. I think the fact that you talk shit is because you whipped their ass. I don't think it has any relevance on what you did or didn't do. Like, maybe
but if Tennessee went on and then won the national, or went to the final game. I mean, no, that game would have lost all significance. No one would have given a shit. Any South Carolina fan that would have said 63-30 or whatever, Tennessee would have been like, yeah, we went on to the national championship. Like who cares? We don't even talk about that.
Well,
we don't even think about that game.
But I can't prove you wrong because you're creating a counterfactual that serves no purpose. Tennessee was not good enough to play in the national championship game last year because they got their ass beat by Georgia. So they might have rematched in the SEC championship game without a division, which is what they would have done. They would have been the 1 and the 2 seed in the conference, and they would have played in Atlanta. They would have rematched, and maybe Tennessee with Hendon Hooker, had he been healthy, maybe they, again, you can just go if, like if the quarterback hadn't torn his ACL, if there was no divisions, if they played better against Georgia, if they then won 2 games in the playoff, like you're
or how about the kick
going
six?
way far
how about
down
the
the
kick
line.
6 when Auburn, I mean, Alabama was going to win 3 in a row. Let's call it like it was. They were on their way to winning 3 in a row. They were undefeated, and Chris Davis knocked them out of the BCS race. You know, Alabama last year losing to Tennessee, losing to LSU, that eliminated them. In a 12 team, they would have just been like, well, we only lost 2, and it was, you know, all this bullshit Nick Saban says. We're the point spread favorite. You know what I mean? Like,
sure. Well,
those games lose their significance. I think those wins, look, the value of them to me.
Auburn still wins the division, plays in Atlanta, beats Missouri, right, with Trey Mason running for like 1,000 yards in that game, and then they go to and instead of having to beat just one team, Florida State, in the 23rd, you're even using an example there that doesn't even include the 4-team playoff, because Alabama might have gotten into the 4-team playoff.
That's what I'm saying. They would have, and then Alabama probably would have whooped their ass in a neutral field.
But
and we would have lost one of the defining moments. Like that game made me want to do what I do. You know, that and the prayer at Jordan Hare. You know,
why is that? Why does that go away? Like Auburn lost the national championship to Florida State. Does that take any value away from
because
because
Alabama was a kick 6 away from winning 3 in a row instead of getting their ass sent home. And
you don't know that.
Ended it right there.
You don't know if they win 2 playoff games. You don't know that.
I guarantee you they would have. That was back-to-back champion. They were undefeated. They were killing everybody.
The only SEC team that I feel comfortable saying definitively would have won a national championship if not for a dramatic, crazy moment is 2012 Georgia. That's the only team. 2012 Georgia. I can go back to 2007 and say that 2007 Georgia was the best team in the country in 2007. We'll never know. I can't prove it. You can't prove your point either. The only one that I think we could probably agree on is the Aaron Murray 2012 Georgia team that would have played Notre Dame in the national championship game had they gotten 5 more yards against Alabama. And if that team played against Notre Dame, I think we all probably pick Georgia. Doesn't mean they win, but we all probably pick Georgia. So to me, you can't put stuff out there and say if with a bunch of different things that could happen unless it's a pretty direct 1-to-1, which is had Georgia beaten Bama in 2012 on that last throw, they play in the BCS title game against Notre Dame. They're in the national championship game. There's no way to prove the other stuff. But again, like, do Auburn fans think it's less important, the kick 6, because they lost to Florida State? Like, that's the only and if the Auburn fans say, hell yeah, it's great, doesn't matter what else happened. They lost to Florida State. They didn't win the national championship. I know that matters, but it doesn't take value away from the kick 6. The kick 6 is one of the greatest plays in the history of the game.
Mm-hmm. Right, but it wouldn't have meant much if Alabama punched their ticket anyway.
All right, I don't know how that's. I mean, we don't know if that would have happened. So I think what you can do is you can watch a great football game, and in the moment you can say, I'm wearing the same shirt, wearing the same colors, singing the same fight song, sitting in the same seat in the same stadium with the same friends that I've had watching games my entire life, and we lost, and in Oklahoma we won. I think that's all that matters on Saturday. And then this coming Saturday, I'm taking my daughters to Neyland Stadium for the first time. Do you think that, like, teaching them about the game and about the culture and about Tennessee football and about the rivalries in the South and what 100,000 people looks like? They've never even seen 100,000 people in one place. Do you think that any of that is going to matter when they're 25 and they've been instilled in this thing that is SEC football? Like, no, what matters is the experience. And now I'm getting off into a different tangent here, but like, if I were to point back to that game and say, well, but Tennessee won their way into the playoff with that game, then it has value. But right now, they already pooped down their legs against Florida, and it doesn't have much value. Like, the Georgia game is kind of the only one that matters. Kentucky matters. But, like, to suggest that these games aren't important, I just think is so silly. And I'm not saying you're doing that, but, like, there's been a whole conversation about devaluing the regular season, and I just think it's horseshit. I think every game becomes more important.
I just hope you teach your daughters that if there's bad officiating, throw shit on the field, curse Jimbo and all this. Teach them right, and have a fit.
Oh.
If Tennessee loses, it's okay to throw a fit and just make a scene. And
they're too old for sippy cups. They're too old for sippy cups, but we're bringing some sippy cups ready to go, like ready to launch. And we're sitting low enough that we might be able to land one on the visiting sideline. So hopefully the SEC doesn't look at this footage later when a bright green sippy cup comes flying in and hits Max Johnson in the side of the head. We'll see. Maybe it's barbecue sauce. I don't know instead of mustard, what should we throw? Barbecue sauce, maybe. We'll see. All right, let me. We do have to actually talk about the games of this weekend and games of last weekend real quickly here. Since you talked about being embarrassed, you have continually. I'm not going to say that your ideas about Bama are wrong. They're not as good as they used to be. But this idea that Jalen Milroe, I think your blatant disrespect for Jalen Milroe. He is not elite. I'm not saying he is.
I don't think I've ever called him out. I call out Tommy Rees.
You said on your show today, you couldn't believe that Texas A&M made Jalen Milroe look that good. I got some news. Jalen Milroe is ahead of every major efficiency metric. He is a more efficient quarterback in every major metric than Bryce Young was last year. Yards per attempt, completion percentage, quarterback rating, you name it. He has been better than Bryce Young. I'm not saying the eye test says that. Bryce Young's a better player. But for a guy who's starting basically his fourth or fifth game to go on the road in that environment, to complete big passes down the field the entire game, he did it against Texas. He did it against Ole Miss. He can run out of the pocket. The defense is legit. They are one of the most undisciplined teams I've ever seen. They are not great enough to win a championship, but they are going to win the division, and they're going to play in Atlanta, and it's because the quarterback's better than you're giving him credit for.
No, I'm not ready to say that. I mean, they could lose to LSU. They could lose at Kentucky. They could lose to Tennessee. They could lose at Auburn. There's many losable games here, and now, the defense is elite, certainly. The defense, the special teams stepped up in a big way. They won the day at 8. When you have that elite of defense and you make the plays on special teams, and Burton, I mean, he was unguardable. I never would have penciled him in as like a star number 1, maybe like a really solid number 2 receiver.
Still lost his cool a few times too. So
he was the elite of elite on Saturday. Now, I think A&M pulled their corner, so let's not take away from Burton.
Well,
but
one of the throws, he was under pressure, and the cornerback was in his pocket. That the one that tied the game to the back right pylon was an elite throw. He is not an elite quarterback. You guys in the comments, he's not even a top 3 quarterback in the conference right now, in my opinion, maybe. But I've heard Mike talk.
Wait, so why are you pumping him up?
Because I've heard you talk so much shit about him, and I'm like, dude, A&M didn't make him look good. He made himself.
Did you watch the Texas game?
He made the game-winning throw in the fourth quarter down the field to give them the lead. What I don't know what else you're supposed like.
He had a couple of turnovers too
in his third career start. Like, give me a break.
He's getting sacked like crazy. He's holding on to the ball a long time.
Yeah, it's all his fault. The offensive line's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah, I agree. So we're back to me being right again. But
when they beat Arkansas, because they're a 3-touchdown favorite this week. By the way, poor one out for Arkansas. Man, what a brutal schedule. When Bama wins and they have one major, they got to beat Tennessee at home and they beat LSU at home, and then they got the Auburn game. That's tough. I get it. Those are tough games.
You just wrote off at Kentucky.
That's true. I did.
I don't know why this team is. They're a different team on the road.
Yeah, and they just got to win.
Well, that's because they went against a moron coach, backup quarterback. I mean, it was one mistake after another. I mean, Jimbo's the biggest idiot in the world. I don't understand. He gave up play calling. He gave up coaching the quarterbacks, and look, and the offense took off. Imagine that. He's got to hire someone to make in-game decisions. Critical roster management, NIL. If he can hire someone to do his job now, I mean, now we're cooking with something with
I
A&M.
will give you, you're 1,000,000% right about the timeout on the 4th down. Like, what are we doing? Like, I that one I don't understand. Like that one is.
How about at the end of the first half? I mean, not calling
doing?
a timeout. You would have had the ball with 90 seconds left. You know, a game like that, these little decisions are huge.
It doesn't. The end of the first half doesn't bother me as much as you don't take a timeout on 4th and 2 with the clock running down 2 scores. You run you have your field goal unit ready to go as fast as possible, knowing on 3rd down that you're going to run them out there and kick the field goal. You save your 3rd timeout, and they still should have because of the bounce pass from Milroe, ironically. And they still, again, one of the unluckiest plays that you'll ever see, where a guy's on the ground, catches a pass by inches, and his knee, he bobbles it. Like, I've never seen a play like that. Like, that's just one of those, like, Aeneas Smith's foot dragging into the white. I mean, come on, the Vegas point. Like, I would have won my 2.5+ bet had Aeneas Smith's foot not dragged into the.
And your elite Jalen Milroe got up and threw the ball.
It was dumb. I don't know
the dirt.
Why are they calling that?
The guy was wide open.
Why are they calling that play?
He couldn't get it to him and stopped it. I mean, that was brilliant. But that's elite right there.
Hey, guys, you're right. No human's ever made a mistake playing football. You're right, Mike. Here's the deal. Texas A&M is going to go to Tennessee this weekend, and we're going to have some comparative data because that's the best rushing defense in the country versus the best rushing, or in the SEC, and the best rushing offense. The problem is that Tennessee's numbers are largely inflated because of their schedule. The worst rushing performance on both sides of the ball came against Florida. They've been dominant against everybody else. Texas A&M's defensive line is way better than Florida's defense. Granted, it's Neyland Stadium. They will be at home. It will be crazy. But Jalen Milroe made plays while getting pressured, while getting sacked, down the field in a hostile environment. Joe Milton's going to have to do it at home. He's got probably, I don't know, better receivers. I don't know. Without Brew McCoy, maybe not. But I don't know. I think that Joe Milton's going to have to play his best football game for them to win. That is totally possible for Tennessee to do that. They're going to have to run the ball in the toughest situation they faced. Otherwise, Texas A&M could go in there and out-talent them. And I don't think Tennessee can do that. Tennessee has to play a really, really good game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think one of your only hopes as a Tennessee fan is perhaps the time off has allowed Joe Milton to heal up because he clearly does not look great. That's a stretch to even go that far. But he looked banged up. He looked labored in that South Carolina game, had multiple turnovers. I don't think he had I'm trying to think. I don't think he's had a single game at Tennessee where he's had multiple turnovers until that last week against South Carolina. And if not for those turnovers, Tennessee probably would have won by even more. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no. And what did they do after that second turnover? They turned around and ran the football the rest of the game.
Right. So you can't
they do that this week?
Can't do that against A&M. Yeah. And you're not going to be able to do it the following week either at Alabama. So this has got to be where it takes off is probably the wrong word because I don't think he's got that in him. And to your point, Brew McCoy's injured. He's not going to suit up again. They've got capable receivers, but I thought they'd be a lot better. They're not nearly as good as I thought. So yeah, I mean, Joe Milton's got to push the ball down the field. I don't even want to mention how far he can throw the ball. It's ridiculous at this point in time, but that doesn't matter because they're not going to give you all day to pick them apart. Although they did at time, Jalen Milroe went 3-man rush.
Well, the offensive line did a good job. So Andrew says this: Tennessee's wide receivers will have to play well because Texas A&M blitzes 5 all the time and puts their secondary on an island. Here is the positive if you're a Tennessee fan: Texas A&M secondary cannot cover. And so what I'm curious about from a Heupel standpoint is what do you do coming out of the gate? Are you going to challenge them down the field right away and say, look, if you are going to pressure us, if you are going to stack the box, if you're going to play 7 guys in the box, and we are going to throw the ball on every down and see if you can stop us down the field, because eventually we're going to connect on some of those plays because A&M can't cover. It's not as bad as LSU, but it's not good. And so I'm curious, what does Heupel's game plan look like coming out? Because I think if they come out and do what we all maybe traditionally want to see, which is run the football between the tackles, which is kind of what we always say about Tennessee, establish the run. I wonder if they need to invert the game plan and start out by chucking it around, and then as they loosen up the front 7, go back and hit them with the run. So I don't know. I'll be fascinated. Josh Heupel has to earn his money this week.
Right. And Stephen Lassen, friend of both shows, made an excellent point on today's show. The tempo, that could perhaps be an equalizer if you get those big linemen from A&M running up and down the field, because I think that's the only
my ankle. Oh, my ankle hurts. Hang on.
that's the only thing I think Tennessee could do,
Ow.
because A&M should be at a massive advantage on the line of scrimmage in this matchup.
Yep.
So that's another huge concern I have for the Vols in this one.
Milton has to be good. He has to play near perfect game, and I think they can win. If the coaching staff puts together, again, I think structurally there are ways to attack the A&M defense, and if you can do it, a good coach should be able to manage a good quality, efficient quarterback. And if you look at the efficiency numbers, Joe Milton, not even like a top 10 quarterback right now from an efficiency standpoint. So he's got the ability, though.
One thing I've not heard discussed, and you're just not going to hear much about this until it actually happens, but clearly last year we had some big issues in A&M, and a lot of that was in the locker room. And
I think
at a program like A&M, I mean, what is the goal? The goal is to beat Bama. What happens when you come up short? They always play Alabama better than just about anybody for some reason. And how does this team respond, particularly if they get in a hole early? Do they cave? Or do those
I agree.
issues resurface? I have no idea. I'm not saying they will.
No. I think
I think that could happen as well.
I was asked last week. I was on with I go on every week with Jason Swain and Josh Ward in Knoxville, and they asked me, if you're a Vols fan, what are you rooting for? Texas A&M to win or Texas A&M to lose against Bama? And my argument was you wanted them to lose. Obviously, the shine comes off the game a little bit, right? Like, it's not as hyped a matchup. It's still CBS either way. But I think the chance that Texas A&M completely no-shows is not possible if they beat Alabama. But if you lose to Bama and you start to exhale and the air comes out of the balloon a little bit, and you've lost in the non-conference, and now you've lost in the division, and maybe you don't feel like you've got any, like, that's Texas. You're absolutely right. That is A&M's biggest problem, is consistency. They get up for the big games. They don't get up 12 weeks a year. It's a personal problem. See a doctor about it. I have concerns that they don't show up. If I'm an A&M fan, that's what I would be concerned about. Because if they show up and play their best, they are more talented than Tennessee. The home game could be the difference for Tennessee. Like, I have no idea who to pick in this game. So I'm not making predictions, but it is about, if Tennessee runs the football and Joe Milton doesn't turn the ball over, Tennessee wins the game. And if Texas A&M doesn't show up, Tennessee wins the game.
Do you put any stock into things like, I think the number is Tennessee's won 12 in a row at home, and A&M, I don't think they've won a true road game since 2021, or is that kind of irrelevant in these matchups, do you think?
I mean, I think it's relevant. I mean, don't you think it matters, but it's not like top 5 or 7 issue, right? Like, I
feel like if Tennessee wins, that everybody would be like, why the hell could you not see Tennessee was going to win, And then and then if A&M kills them, it'd be like, yeah, those streaks are meaningless. So I don't know. It's just information.
Yeah. Listen, I think the home field is important for a team that's sort of on the edge sometimes of good versus great. You know what I mean? Like, Tennessee is clearly a good football team. Are they a great one? Well, that could be having A&M at home. Like, that could be the margin that we're talking about here. Again, I'm not making a pick here. I just think where is Texas A&M mentally versus a rested team in Tennessee that's at home? Tennessee should win the football game. But we also said that about the Florida game. So they haven't seen anything like this defense, though. Florida's defense is not even close to this from a personnel standpoint. Nolan, Cooper,
UTSA.
Yeah, that's right. The front seven for A&M is just sick. Let's get to Missouri, Kentucky here, because I want to talk about Kentucky. I find if I'm not a fan of Kentucky, but I really, really like, you and I have argued about this. I like Mark Stoops a lot more than you do. I was so frustrated watching Devin Leary play football last weekend. I mean, just guys were open. And he talked about it going into the game. He talked about how he wasn't happy with his performance this season. He's down there with Joe Milton in terms of completion percentage and all the efficiency metrics in the SEC from a quarterback standpoint, and you just looked at it and you're like, that dude was wide open. I think at one point Mark Stoops is on the sideline going, just throw the fucking ball, dude. Like just throw the ball to the open player. It was so frustrating as just a football person to watch him just miss open guys. It wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game. I think Georgia's too good. And that bet I tried to tell all y'all to make, the best Heisman bet for odds in the SEC is the Georgia quarterback. Starting to feel pretty good about that. I don't have much to add about Georgia. They're really good. But Devin Leary's got to hit the open guy. You're at home against Missouri. It's a weird game. You still got a whole lot to play for. You gotta hit open players when they're there. It's so frustrating to watch.
Yep. C+ coach, go C+ coach. Braden. I mean, it is what he is. He never beats anyone that has better talent than him, and then if he does, then he drops one that he shouldn't.
So you think they lost to Georgia because of Mark Stoops?
I mean,
why don't you provide some real analysis to the game?
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's loses to Georgia every time, doesn't he? I mean, you can't just
because everyone else continually beats Georgia. You're right.
You can't play Georgia ball against Georgia with inferior talent, and that's why he came out here on Monday and said we got to buy better players. I mean, because that's what matters. You know, having those players. If you're gonna, that's why I think what Billy Napier at Florida is doing is stupid too, because he's never going to have. I mean, he may in like 5 years have a better roster than Georgia, but it ain't going to be this year, next year, the year after, and probably not year 4. You know what I mean? Like it takes time. You just can't. You can't do what the champs are doing with inferior talent.
This is literally the words that I said on the show last week, and you told me I was an idiot.
Well, you just said Mark Stoops, great coach, and all this, and yada, yada, yada. I mean, you just keep pounding your head against the wall because you're never going to beat Georgia like this. Never.
When has Kentucky ever had good enough players to beat the back-to-back national champions? When has that ever happened in the history of the game?
It will never happen unless that's why Mark Stoops is begging for more money for these players, even though he makes quite a bit of money. He can donate.
So then maybe we should suggest that it's the structure of the game that has led Kentucky to where it is, and not the coach's fault. Probably, right?
Well,
it's probably the fact that Alabama and Ohio State and Georgia and Clemson and USC and the teams with all the most history, prestige, money, and talent and recruiting base are the ones that win all the championships all the time. It's probably not that. It's probably Mark Stoops, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because he's got a real problem, Braden, just trying to do what Georgia's doing, but with lesser talent. It just ain't going to happen. So
I don't know. They've won 10 games 3 times. Like what? It's better than any coach in the history of the program. I don't know.
I believe he's got 2 wins. This is a stat going around. He's got 2 wins over SEC teams that finished with a winning record, that's incredible to believe. But
you're talking about like conference record.
Yes,
so 5-3 or better
in 11 seasons. He's been there. So, I mean, yeah, he's the greatest of all time. But
in Kentucky's, just like Dan Mullen was the best quarterback in Mississippi State history.
Yeah, I mean they beat some people too, if memory serves. But
they're really, really hard places to win, Mike. I don't know if you're aware or if you've watched college football, but it's really, really hard to win at Kentucky and Mississippi State.
Yeah,
I don't know what you want to say.
I don't know. I just don't think you should get embarrassed like this year in, year out.
What happens if Tennessee loses for the 3rd straight time in embarrassing fashion to Georgia? You going to say the same thing?
No, because he's not been there 11 years. He's been there 3 years.
But he has way more resources. Tennessee's a much bigger, badder athletic department with a better recruiting base, better history, better
and
tradition.
And I would argue that he's in year 2. He had a better year than Mark Stoops will ever have.
No, they basically matched. A 10-win regular season. Same thing Stoops did twice.
Stoops has never had a 10-win regular season. You need to check your facts on that one, sir.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll double check that. He's had 2 10-win seasons at Kentucky. So if those were bowl games, then I apologize. But yeah. You're right. But here's the point: you should do that at Tennessee. That's what Tennessee's expectations, resources, and their makeup tells you. Their DNA is winning a national championship caliber football program. That's the way Tennessee has been for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why you don't think that matters. Again, we've already now we're talking about Stoops again. Why did you do this to me? Talk about Kentucky's defense at home against Brady Cook and Missouri, because that's more interesting than how wrong you are about Mark Stoops.
Yeah, I'm curious if this humbles them at all, because there was a true sense that they could hang with Georgia.
Mm.
Hell, I thought they could hang with Georgia, but I think that said to me that was more about Georgia not being the best team in the country, which they sure as hell look like it on Saturday, just blowing the doors off Kentucky. But and otherwise, Missouri, they just lost to LSU, and really, if they don't have those 2 turnovers, they would have won that game. I feel like that's a different narrative. You know what I mean? Than getting your doors blown off and saying, yeah, we really are a mile away from competing at a high level in the SEC. Whereas Missouri can turn around and say, a couple bad plays. If we don't make those bad plays, we would have won this game. So I don't know. I kind of like Missouri and their momentum heading. I mean, I'm seeing it all over. Braden, these fans they're out on Stoops, and they don't want to go to the game. I mean, we literally have coaches right now on Kentucky staff begging fans, please come to the Missouri game. We need you out here. And that's a bad sign. I feel like that's a terrible sign heading into this matchup.
Well, I think if quarterback play is the most important thing on the field, which it tends to be, one guy's playing the best football of his entire life at the highest level in the SEC with elite weapons, and the other one's Devin Leary. So right. I again, I thought the scheme from Cohen was really solid in the first half against Georgia. They had dudes open. Mm-hmm. They were running the ball on the first 2 drives, just shit penalties by an offensive lineman. And Walker, Deion Walker, what were you doing in that game? They did the Tennessee thing. What Tennessee did to Florida is what Kentucky did to Georgia. And I don't know if it's KT or Wreck-It or whatever, but you said Georgia's had 7 years to build under Smart and Heupel's had 3 years. There's a difference. Obviously, my point wasn't anti-Heupel and anti-Tennessee. It was pro Stoops in Kentucky. Heupel is going to be fine, but it takes years to build it, which is my point last week when Mike was firing Billy Napier after a year and a half. So we shall see. We'll get to the Florida-South Carolina game, but I'm with you. I like Missouri. And I really like this Kentucky team. This is sort of the 2 teams that I really liked all summer, going up against each other. I know you guys were kind of on the same boat, you and Shane, and so I think Missouri on the road, because Brady Cook is playing the best football of his life, and Devin Leary's not. So yeah, I know that's oversimplifying it, but Missouri, you're not going to play an offense like LSU most of the season. I think the defense is better than what they allowed last week.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Are you at all concerned about Missouri's defense getting shredded? I know Jane Daniels is playing at an elite level, but a lot of those play. I mean, some of the plays, those guys were just wide ass. So it's like why cover Malik Neighbors?
Well,
who the hell is he?
The last one, was it Thomas or Neighbors that was wide open?
I think it was Neighbors.
Where he's just standing on the 6-yard line. You're like, what are you doing?
Maybe cover that guy.
It was
and it was third. It's 3rd and 9. They're like, let's just let Jane Dales run for it. It's like he can't run, can he? He's
to give him credit. I will say
in the SEC in rushing right now.
Yeah, I will say the 3rd and 5 call though, the quarterback draw call that ended up being a touchdown. That is a great call by LSU. That was a great offensive call there by Den Brock. I think what's interesting is it's like a South Carolina Mississippi State game. No, we're just not going to cover anybody. We're just going to let the receivers run as open as they want down the field, and we'll see what happens later. So I like Missouri on the road. I am concerned about their defense because their schedule is getting to the point where they're playing elite teams, elite offenses, elite quarterbacks. Tennessee's going to do this. They're getting to their schedule where they're playing elite defenses finally. Everyone's getting into the meat of it all. And shit comes home to roost real fast. So I think Missouri's defense, I'm concerned, but I also think LSU makes a lot of people look like that. So if they get how about this? If they get torched by if Devin Leary goes 22 of 26, then I've got major concerns about Missouri's defense.
I think there's some bad blood here too. I don't know what it is. Everybody's got bad blood with Mark Stoops, Beamer, Heupel, the Kentucky fans, John Calipari. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is, but
God, now you got to make me say
Napier.
Something negative.
I think Napier. I don't think likes him. Now
you got to make me say something negative about a Kentucky person. I mean, John Calipari is one of the most overrated coaches in the history of the game. That's just me. There's a reason that Mitch Barnhart likes Mark Stoops and not John Calipari. Calipari and Barnhart don't even talk apparently. So that's all you need to know about that. I listen, Kentucky as an athletic department is nowhere right now without Mark Stoops. Like their volleyball program is better because of Mark Stoops. I just want everybody to know that. The same way everything at Tennessee is better because Josh Heupel's team is good. Football changes everything. Football being good makes everything better. All right. Speaking of Beamer and Napier, I am utterly fascinated with this game because the loser's in for a really brutal season.
Yep.
And the winner, if it's Florida in particular, they've got a chance to right the ship and show progress. South Carolina's schedule is still pretty salty. Florida's schedule, not all that easy either. But how many wins we got left for Billy Napier on the schedule and for Shane Beamer? Not a lot of wins. Maybe one or two left for either of them.
Oh, I think South Carolina
Guaranteed.
can win a lot of these.
Okay.
Jackson State, Vandy.
Okay. So
that's two. Kentucky at home, perhaps. A&M. I mean, the wheels could be coming off at A&M at any moment.
I agree. Who knows? Who knows?
Right.
I think, look, Florida's one of the better rushing offenses in the conference. South Carolina, one of the worst rushing defenses in the conference. They are at home. So
where Florida, I don't know, aside from Arkansas, they're not going to be favored in any of these games.
No, but I think every game that's not sort of Georgia or Vanderbilt, maybe Bama's in that group. I'm not sure yet. Almost every game is a toss-up. We said it at the beginning of the season. We said it in the summer. I'm going to stick with it now. Missouri, Florida, toss-up. Missouri, LSU, toss-up. LSU, Florida, toss-up. They're all toss-ups.
Go with me here. If, and this is an if, I'm not predicting it, but if they lose to South Carolina, they'll be 1-8 again, all outside the swamp under Napier. So, despite being 1-8, you think at LSU and at Mizzou are toss-ups?
I just think all the games are toss-ups. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's going to go that way.
Right.
Sure. Do I want to see Billy Napier perform better away from home? Sure. I heard some. I hate to cut you off here. They're trying new things in Gainesville. They're taking their own pillows, and they're leaving like an hour early. No, they're mixing it up because they're going on the road. They're like, we're working. We're bringing our own pillows. We're going to leave a little bit earlier. That's the change we need to win on the road. I swear to God, I read that this week. They're taking their own pillows to Columbia. That's weird. I love how you gravitate towards the strangest things about the SEC, which I appreciate.
It means he's fucking clueless. They're taking their pillows. Like that's going to help them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's the reason.
Coach better, execute better. That's how you go win on the road. It's not going to be your fucking pillow.
Okay. Well, they were a heavy underdog to Utah, at least before the season started, and they should not have won that game. They didn't. The Kentucky game, you got to beat Kentucky if you're the Florida coach eventually. The same way Tennessee coaches eventually have to beat Florida. Like you have to beat teams that are considered below you in the hierarchy. But where Mark Stoops is in year 11 is different than where Billy Napier is in like his 14th game. So while it's disappointing if I'm a Florida fan, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater yet. You need to see the whole thing through. And I think patience is not it's a virtue in life, and it doesn't really exist in the SEC. It doesn't mean it shouldn't exist in the SEC. And I'm waiting to see the end of the season and what Florida has a quarterback that at one of the winningest programs in the Big Ten could not succeed and is now completing 80% of his passes. 80%. There have been 4 quarterbacks in the SEC since Greg McElroy in 2010 who have completed over 70% of their passes. It's not a thing that happens in the SEC. 70% of your passes. Doesn't happen. It's happened 4 times in 12 years. 4 times. There are 5 quarterbacks in the SEC right now over 70%. And number 1 is Graham Mertz at 80%. They're not asking him to beat the world and sling it all over the place and go down the field. I get it. But I think he's been the best version of himself. And isn't that what you are grading a coach on in this period of time are you maximizing your players? And I think he's maximized Graham Mertz as best he possibly could.
Yeah, you would think, though, with a punishing ground physical attack and a quarterback completing 80% of his like you'd have some hell of an offense. But
they're top 5 in the SEC.
Hell, I don't even see that when they play Vanderbilt.
No. Weren't they down their number one running back and 2 offensive linemen and a few other things in that game?
Yeah, and Vandy was down their quarterback, and
Vandy was Vandy.
You know, one of their star linebackers was out. Their
Where are all the
safety's
Vandy
playing on
commenters,
one
by the way?
leg. You know what I mean?
Where are all the Vandy commenters at? Where are they at? Curing cancer and fighting civil rights battles in court. Carson Beck, yes, he is getting better and better and better. I tried to tell y'all, if you're gonna put a few bucks down on a Heisman bet, Carson Beck was. And Mike laughed at me. He's not
going to win the Heisman, though, is he? I mean,
no, I wouldn't bet. I mean, he's not the
I don't even think he's a candidate.
Oh, I just wait.
I don't even think he's the top candidate on his team.
Well, I'm a voter, and I would not vote for him as the top candidate on his own team. You're right, but that's not how the group think votes. Yeah. They vote for the quarterback on the best team a lot of the time.
He's got to have a big game somewhere, and.
What are you talking about?
Well, no. I mean, like in a marquee, you know, whether it's Bama and SEC or at Tennessee, you know what I mean? Like,
so 3:30 game and a come from behind win over Auburn. While it is not a marquee opponent, it was a marquee performance, and the whole country watched.
Right. I mean, Auburn might be 5-7. I mean, they're not going to give you a trophy for that.
I just said all that. Thank you for repeating me what I said. Kentucky was a nationally televised home game as a 2-touchdown favorite in which he torched them in the first half. I'm not saying beating Kentucky is the same as beating Bama in the SEC championship game or a playoff game. I'm not arguing that, but it's the best they've got so far. And he keeps getting better, and the offense keeps getting better, and the offense keeps getting healthier. Vanderbilt is what it is. Florida, Missouri, Ole Miss, neutral, home.
See, I think like if it's not that this is going to play out this way, but like if they play Ole Miss and it's like,
thank you, Jeffrey.
48-45 or something. It's like a dueling Jackson Dart Beck. I think that's how you get in the conversation.
That'll be a hell of a quarterback game. Right now, those are 2 of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the conference. And if
but then he'll lose it the next week when they lose in Neyland Stadium. Just so you know, he's going to throw 3 picks. And Joe Milton is going to have 9 touchdowns against Georgia.
I'm just gonna let you do this. Jeffrey says I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth and I sound like a politician. Number 1, thank you. Number 2, I don't have any clue what you're talking about, but if you put some details in there, I'll address it. Anyway, I'm taking Missouri on the road. I think if Florida can, Williams-Brice is an incredibly difficult place to play. It's not at nighttime, but the fourth quarter will be at night, right? It's 3:30 kickoff, and it'll be in the second half. It'll be dark, and that's when things get crazy at Williams-Brice. And so, if they can sort of maintain composure and they stick to their game plan, then I think Florida should be able to run the football for most of the game. So,
did you hear that Georgia hype train coming?
I don't.
Okay.
Sure.
I live on the railroad tracks.
Can there be a hype train for a back-to-back national champion? I don't know. Auburn LSU, we've not talked about at all. And for one of the better games in this league historically, 2 of the best uniforms, just a great rivalry in the division. Crazy shit happens in this game too. I heard some silly podcast host on that SEC podcast saying that he thinks Auburn's going to play really well in this game. Now, the argument against LSU, because they've played exhausting games, shootouts where they've begged the offense to just keep scoring 3 straight games now, and they've won 2 of those. They lost to Ole Miss, of course. I think that's a sound argument. I don't know what part of Auburn's offense, in your mind, is going to score any points. LSU only needs to get to like 31, and I know their defense is terrible, but unless Auburn is running for 400 yards, they are not going to be in this. They are not going to challenge LSU in Baton Rouge.
Perhaps, but I mean, if Hugh Freeze and company are good enough to scheme up what they did against Georgia, I would think, even though it's on the road, 2 weeks to prepare for this LSU defense, I think they'll find a way. I mean, even if it's like, and this might sound crazy, but starting Robbie Ashford. Like I heard that might even be on the table, but I don't think it is. I would
have started Robbie Ashford from week 1 though. So that's I agree. I agree with that. I think the offense runs better. It's what Hugh Freeze wants to run.
Right. But I mean, Peyton Thorne, he probably played his best game against Georgia. I think that's fair to say as well. So I don't know. That's just what I was told prior to that Georgia game, there was going to be massive changes, and then hell, it looked like there was massive. They just went ahead and did it against Georgia, and it worked. So I don't know. This has always been one of my favorite games in the SEC.
That's true.
It used to be typically the first big West showdown of the season every year, and oftentimes it was
September.
Yeah, a lot of times it was their first SEC game for each of these teams. So very physical, hard fought, and unfortunately, it's not that going to be that way. I don't think, because LSU's defense is so poor and Auburn's offense is so poor. So at least it's strength on strength in this matchup, and
weakness on weakness. Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the hell to make of LSU. One week they look like they could win the West, and then what
do you need to see? Like, they have the most efficient, most explosive, most dynamic, and hardest to stop individual player probably in the conference. Mm-hmm. They've got elite weapons everywhere that are going to get the football even when people cover them or when they don't. They're going to score a bunch of points, and the defense can't stop anything. Like, I'm not sure what else you need to see. Like, they are what they are, which is why they're not going to beat Alabama on the road. So I don't know what else you need to see from LSU to know what they are. Like, they are an elite offensive team and maybe the worst defensive team that LSU statistically has ever had in the history of its program.
Well, I mean, I would like to see, some of these outstanding defensive players live up to their hype, because I think that would cure a lot of the woes there for LSU.
Perkins made the big play, man. He made the interception and won the game for him.
Right.
I don't know if that counts for something.
We need more of that. You know what I mean? We need Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo disrupting the offensive lines. We need.
I agree. It makes no sense. Sense.
They actually have some pretty talented secondary players, but I think most of them are freshmen, so they're afraid to play them. But they'll just throw them out there. It literally cannot get any worse. Mistakes will be made, but. The upperclassmen they have in there don't seem to have any athleticism,
especially against Auburn's passing offense. Like,
right?
If you're gonna succeed against somebody, build some confidence for a young player. Play him against Auburn's passing attack. That'll build some confidence for you. I think LSU. I just don't see how Auburn scores enough points. Like, even against the terrible LSU defense, Jaden Daniels right now is on another planet with his efficiency. And while I do worry about his body breaking in half every time he runs the football. You can't get to him, man.
Right.
You can't get to him. It's hard to get to him.
Well, Ole Miss got to him that one time.
Slide, bro. Just learn how to slide or get out of bounds.
Did you see what RG3 said about him? And I'm not even a religious guy, but I thought it was awkward what he said.
Was he doing the? Was it the Jesus comment or whatever?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, what?
I'm agnostic. I have no opinion.
I don't think you can be saying that on a SEC broadcast, though. I think
don't give a shit.
I think that is
America, baby. Personal freedom. I choose whatever I want to choose, and right now, I choose to slide. Just get down.
It's not RG3 network. It's ESPN.
Well, as an employee, sure. RG3, look, this is America. RG3 can think and feel whatever he wants to feel, and I got no problem with it. This is personal freedom, baby. Mm-hmm. RG3 can say whatever he wants when he's on a broadcast, within reason, I guess, and not get fired. So I think it's great. I think it's ironic that of all the quarterbacks who are commenting about Jaden Daniels' potential injuries, I think RG3 being the guy who is the worst faller in the history of football. No one has ever been tackled harder than RG3. Like, RG3 has no idea how to slide and get down and get out of the way. And so maybe he recognizes Jaden Daniels and sees that in him. Maybe that's what it is.
Perhaps.
Oh man. Okay. We talked about, by the way, Ole Miss. They're off this week. Sneaky. That's a quality win over Arkansas.
I basically wrote them off when they lost to god awful Alabama. I mean, I'm done with them.
They're so bad,
and they're still going to lose. They're going to lose at Georgia. They're just irrelevant to me, because
you know that Bama is like going to beat Georgia or some shit like that in the SEC championship game, right?
I'm willing it. I'm a closeted Bammer, but yeah. I mean, hell, I think they could lose at Auburn even. A&M, Georgia,
guys. somebody said this in the comments, and I apologize for not seeing who it was, but basically somebody said, I wouldn't be surprised if Florida beats LSU. Anything is possible. And I think that is the truth in the conference this year. Again, outside of Vanderbilt and Georgia, and those two, and even some games against Georgia, like anything is possible. Anything is possible. All of these teams can beat each other. I think we said it all summer. It's going to be I said it on your show. You said it on my show. This is going to be the deepest, most balanced conference we've seen in a long time. And that is what we are seeing. Look at the point spreads this week. 3, Texas A&M, Tennessee. 2, Florida, South Carolina. 2.5, Missouri, Kentucky. I mean, Auburn, LSU. Those two teams don't look anything close to each other. It's an 11-point spread with Auburn on the road. Anything is possible. And that's why we play the games. And it's why a 12-team playoff won't devalue any of it. Because it's still good. Still
are you trying to tell us all that Arkansas is beating Alabama? That's what I came here to hear.
It'd be elite content is what it would be. And I love elite content. I would vote for elite content over elite anything else. Give me a great game that creates good content. And frankly, what I want, my daughter asks me this all the time because I watch all these games, and if it's not Tennessee, she's always like, well, who are we rooting for, Dad? Number one, definitely not Bama. But if I had to teach her about A&M, like we're rooting for them this week, but not next week. So she always asks, like, who are we rooting for? And I go, overtime, honey, overtime. And my wife like looks at her and goes, no, Dad just wants to watch good games. And I'm like, yeah, I do. That's all I want. I want good football games, exciting, good quality, dramatic football games. And guess what? We're going to get it this week. We're going to get it next week. It's one of the best. I think we're going to have one of the craziest years we've ever had. I think we're en route already. So hopefully that means, somebody challenges Georgia a few times other than just Auburn. So we'll see.
So, yeah, let me ask you that because you kind of naturally went into that. That means, let's say Georgia doesn't win the SEC, as unlikely as that seems. Who is most likely to prevent them from doing that? And it could be any West team. It could be Mizzou or Tennessee in the East. I don't know who's most likely to prevent Georgia from winning the SEC championship.
You have to get them in a one-game situation. So, who's going to get them in a one-game situation? Bama or LSU? That's it. LSU could outscore them, maybe. Bama might be able to make the game slow and ugly, maybe. I would lean Bama because I think they're the more complete team. They have a far better defense than LSU. Their quarterback makes plays as well. Not as good as Jaden Daniels. Bama is the answer. And I know you've been fighting this for 12 months, trying to keep people from thinking that Alabama is any good at football. And while they are not as good as Alabama of old, they are not going to win a championship this year. They are still the best hope of knocking off Georgia if that's what you are asking. Who's got the best chance to beat Georgia? Alabama in an SEC championship game. LSU be my second vote. Third, if Hendon Hooker was still in Knoxville, it would very clearly be Tennessee. In fact, it might be Tennessee number 1 if Hendon Hooker was in Knoxville. But he's not. So I think Ole Miss on the road is the team to watch out for if I'm Georgia. I've been saying that with you. I've been saying that to you for months. The team to watch if I'm Georgia is Ole Miss at home. You're coming off 2 emotional games, physical games against Florida and Missouri. You're looking ahead to Tennessee. You get Jackson Dart coming to town with an offense that could sling it around. That's with Judkins and all those weapons. The team that I'm circling is Ole Miss at home. That's the game that I'd be concerned about if I'm Georgia.
Okay.
What's your answer? Because I know it's not Bama. But
I mean,
what's your answer?
You took like 6 there, but
no, number 1 is Bama. That's it. It's Bama. And number two is LSU because that's the only other team that could really play them in Atlanta, in my opinion. Number 3 is Ole Miss.
I would say LSU. I think that's the answer. They gotta get something.
So they're going to score 70
on defense.
They're going to score 70 on Georgia. Is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because you're going to need 70.
That's the only shot.
Well. All right, so 3-time or not 3-time, back-to-back SEC champs, your Georgia Bulldogs. All right, have a great weekend, everybody. That SEC podcast, SEC Football Live, everywhere you get your pods. We do appreciate you guys for hanging out. Obviously, enjoy the weekend. Rate, review, subscribe, and if you want to check out some game previews for both A&M, Tennessee, and Kentucky and Missouri. We're going to have those up on the 440 Sports YouTube page. So head on over there, give us a follow, give us a subscribe. We really would appreciate it. We've got all kinds of game previews over there. So myself, Stephen Lassen, do those, who, of course, if you listen to this show, you know all about. So we do appreciate it. Maybe Mike one day on his show will promote this show. I don't know. Maybe he will. We'll see. I'm just going to ask you on the air now to do it.
I think I did yesterday. I think so.
Everyone,
I can't remember.
Yeah, 59 minutes in, I believe. We do appreciate it. Thank you guys for listening. For Mike, I am Braden. We'll talk to you guys next week.